The garden is a feast for the senses. Flowers and plants awaken all kinds of sensations, and it's said the effects of aromas can be significant. Tonight, fragrant flowers and making sense in the garden.
Once the plant is infected, there really isn't anything you can do about it.
The root flare is right along here, so we want to make sure that's below ground level.
Watermelons, muskmelons.
This is yellow or gray cone flower.
This one's called Picasso in pink.
Hello and welcome to what I'm sorry to say is our final regular season edition of Great Gardening, but we have a lot of good growing tips to share. We welcome back garden experts Tom Casper, the president of Duluth Garden Flower Society, and Bob Olin, state and county educator and horticulturist. Can you guys believe we have another season under our belts?
That's amazing. Season 11 in the books.
It is.
Right, very fast. And we finally have got some good growing weather, so things are beginning to happen. Those that persevere, don't you think, Tom, are being rewarded at this point?
Yeah, it's
Season
a little
11.
it's a little surprising that the spring went by so fast since we didn't have one. Or maybe that shouldn't surprise me.
Spring was Tuesday. It's summer now.
Yeah. So things are going in and growing up.
Things are finally getting out of the ground. It's rather remarkable. I haven't seen a season like this where it took warm season crop seeds so long to emerge, but finally things are taking off, and now we can expect good things to happen.
Great. Also joining us, the Carleton County Master Gardeners to man the phones tonight, help keep them busy with your questions about this unusual season or maybe what you hope to still make of it. Call or send an email. The number's on your screen, 218-788-2844. That's calling locally, or we have a toll-free number for you too, 877-307-8762. You can also email your questions to askgardening@wdse.org. Well, you should have an idea of our topic for tonight with all the smells surrounding us, and I think the lilacs in particular are pretty intense.
Absolutely. They're so beautiful in here, and it makes it a little easier being inside on a beautiful night like tonight. So.
Right. Yeah, and particularly I think in spring, this time with the lilacs and such, a lot of scents out there.
Oh yeah, the landscapes are wonderful, and it does trigger all the senses. You mentioned the lilacs, the apple blossoms are incredible right now too. Yeah.
They are, yeah. Everything smells good out there. Well, most often when we visit or tour a garden for Great Gardening, we hear about something that adds fragrance to the landscape. Here are a number of good examples. From across the region, gardens teem with beauty and with scent. One of the favorites for fragrance, of course, is the rose.
And the old garden rose has been in commerce before 1867. This is an example. This is Sidoni. And notice the large number of petals and the fragrance. This is characteristic of the old garden roses.
Other gardeners rely on lilies to perfume their beds.
Orientals have the fragrance along with the OTs. You'd notice that right away. And time of year is basically it. And they are a different look to them too.
The Stargazer Lilies, there's probably one of the nicer ones. Just the color and the scent is just overwhelming.
That lily is the Concours d'Or lily, and that lily is wonderful when it blooms. It gets these huge yellow blooms on it, and it is so fragrant. It smells like the whole backyard. It is, oh. If you want a lily for fragrance, that is the one to get.
Yet the variety of aromatic perennials goes so much further.
It has a real light, sweet smell to it.
It is. It's nice and sweet.
And it's kind of a rough-looking plant, but I like it because it's so tall and it just smells wonderful. This is Campanula lactifolia. I have a lot of other campanulas, but this one is my favorite just because it's big and bold and smells really good.
Shrubs and trees like these magnolia infuse an early spring splendor, as do other more common varieties like peony, crabapple trees, or the heady fragrance from lilacs.
Japanese tree lilac, that's what it is. And it'll get pretty good size too. But yeah, we put that in there when it was 4 little twigs. And they're fast growing, and they're very fragrant when they're blooming.
For something not quite as sweet,
And then my deer deterrent for this garden, we planted probably, 50 alliums in there, different kinds of alliums. So they bloom in the spring, and the leaves and the plant smell. I don't think it was overpowering, the onion smell.
But it's a really cool allium. It'll bloom in September. It has like little white puffballs. You might be familiar with the big purple allium. This is related to it, but it's white, and it's really smells good. Like you'd think an allium would smell of onion, but this one doesn't. It's really fragrant, really pleasant.
and some like something unique to try for a scent reminiscent.
This is a plant called hot buttered popcorn. If you brush the leaves and smell it.
Yum.
Oh, that was funny.
I love my hot buttered popcorn, don't I? I wanted to ask you about those allium, both the purple and the white. Do they work to deter deer?
I don't think necessarily to deter deer. There's very little that seems to these days, but they are a plant that deer don't like or won't eat in the garden. So they are a way of enjoying more blooms or more opportunity in the garden. But I don't think they specifically deter.
Okay. We do have 3 others that we're going to talk about that the deer might stay away from.
Yeah.
And maybe because of the scent. Is that why they stay away from them?
Yeah, Balmer Monarda, my absolute favorite plant. We've talked about it for the past 11 years, so if people are unaware, I'm not sure what they're watching. But I love this plant. Great for hummingbirds, butterflies, bees, and just an outstanding bloom. Wouldn't you say, Bob?
Yeah, it's wonderful. And new varieties that are mildew resistant. I think that's the one downside, but we're getting some new and better varieties. The colors are better, they're expanding, and deer resistant.
Yep. Russian sage is another one that's outstanding with those periwinkle sort of bluish purple flowers, just outstanding in the garden. A little bit touchy, you have to make sure you have some winter cover for it. And then yarrow that we see here, available in the yellow and a multitude of other colors as well for the garden. So,
but don't you think the original yellow is probably, it's the hardiest and probably the more deer resistant?
Exactly.
All right.
I think we just took over that segment.
No, it's all yours, guys. You've got all the answers, okay? Speaking of which, we have questions, so we hope you have all the answers. This one came from Mary. I'm not sure where she's writing from, but she purchased 2 rose plants, the Sunny Knockout variety, put them in their original pot inside wooden barrels at the front door, and is wondering, does she need to transplant them to larger pots? Does she need to fertilize? She does intend to put them in the garden in the fall.
Yes, yes, and yes.
Okay.
Should probably, most of the time those containers really aren't meant for things to grow in for a long period of time, so she should really upsize that to a larger container. Roses are heavy feeders, so she wants to get them fertilized and probably pretty routinely, especially in a container every couple of weeks, and then she'll definitely have to get them in the garden in the fall.
And Tom, she has a wooden barrel, so if she just lined that with a poly bag or a plastic bag, perforate the bottom, and she has a container right there.
Yep, there you go.
Yeah.
Good to go. All right. Wayne in Saginaw wants to know how to get rid of quackgrass in asparagus. And then we also have somebody from Duluth who's wondering if that grass in an asparagus patch can be controlled with Roundup or anything like that.
Very, very difficult. You always want to eliminate all grasses, all perennial weeds before you plant the asparagus. But now that we have it there, you're harvesting, so you really don't have too many options at this point other than pulling, which is very, very difficult. If it continues to persist, you might want to consider actually lifting the asparagus plants out, maybe in the fall, carefully, and then you can spray at that point with Roundup or glyphosate, and that should eliminate it in the fall, and then replanting after about 7 days. That might be a possibility, but to selectively pull it out is very difficult at this point.
Okay. From Ellen on Lake Minising, which is in northwest Wisconsin, she wonders about her forsythia, which is 3 years old. It bloomed the first year, but not the second and third year. It's in full sun and good soil.
And we talked about this a little bit, and there's a lot of varieties of forsythia out there. She wants to make sure she got something that's hardy for northern Minnesota, northern Wisconsin. if she purchased it, say, in the Twin Cities or Madison or something like this, there's a chance that it may not be. The flower buds are what are really susceptible to frost or cold.
Okay.
So it may still grow, but the buds may have froze off during the winter time or dried up. So.
Good point, Tom. These are relatively recent introductions that are really hardy this far north, so it's a good idea to talk with a local nurseryman about it.
Okay. I think it's May in Duluth, has a 3-year-old azalea that has good shoots but bad growth. Should it be cut back?
That's pretty characteristic for a young azalea to be sort of quirky and sort of irregular in growth. Over time, as it gets larger, it will sort of level itself off. But certainly the only time you want to prune an azalea is new growth after it's bloomed and after that growth has grown out to a point. And I do it very carefully.
Yeah, they're not like so many cutback shrubs. They do not come back from the roots and so forth, so you really can't, you're not at liberty to do that. You have to just carefully, but I think I agree. You just want to let it grow out a little more. They take a while to get started.
Yeah, I have one that I think it's a second year and it's looking a little spindly, but it's starting to bloom.
Remember, they're acid lovers. They like full sun, so you want to use an acidifying fertilizer, something like ammonium sulfate to keep that pH down. And then full sun, so I think more fertility, careful with the water, full sun, and those are the best things you can do for azaleas.
And the thing that I've really seen over the last decade or so with azaleas is they're getting much larger than people had originally anticipated. So they're getting 5 and 6 or 7 feet by 7 feet in size, so plan for a big area.
Okay. All right, Georgian Sandstone has a 3-year-old high bush cranberry that has failed to bloom yet, but is growing okay. Should he leave it?
Sometimes when they grow real aggressively, they're still in the juvenile form, so it takes a while for them to mature. I think that's just a maturity issue. Give it a little bit more time.
Okay. And Julian Munger wants to know, can I still go and clean up my raspberry patch now that they're in full leaf, or should I just wait till fall to get out all the weeds out and make the rows straight?
You know, that's a good question. At this point, you don't want to really interfere with the growth. I think any residual canes that need to be pruned up, I think you can take out. I probably would wait until fall to clean it up, though.
Okay. Linda in Moose Lake has flying black ants in her gardens, and now they're just big black ants. So maybe they lost their wings, I'm not sure.
Or their way.
Their way, maybe.
You know, ants, it's kind of interesting because they're very noticeable and they leave hills typically. They don't typically do a lot of damage. And unless it's a major problem, I think I would just live with them.
Okay, all right. Here's something from Lucille in Cloquet. She says her chrysanthemums, have died out this winter and spring. They always did well before. She's wondering what may have happened. Was it the season?
It could be the season, but that's not that uncommon for chrysanthemum to really die from the center and actually the growth to come on the outside ring and it to sort of expand. So not that uncommon for chrysanthemum, relatively short-lived. But if she was able to keep it growing from year to year, that's a good thing. But they do not last a real long time in the garden.
Okay.
And as we've talked about, that was a tough December that we had without any snow cover, cold temperatures. And the healthier a plant is going into the fall, the greater the likelihood that it's going to survive. So keep them growing well right into the fall. And then in this case, you really should be covering with a straw. They're really not dependably winter hardy.
Okay. Debbie from Cromwell, what month is best to transplant a white lilac bush? Since we're talking about things that smell great.
A couple months ago.
Yeah, this year. Which year?
She says it hasn't flowered for 4 years and she wants to move it.
May 1.
I don't know. Okay.
Yep.
All right. Well, we do want to talk about some of the scents that we're experiencing here. And Tom, you brought in some really nice examples of things. And I want to start with that jasmine in the background there. It is just huge, gorgeous, and just the scent is amazing.
Yeah, it's again, we have such a mixture of fragrances going on here in the studio, but jasmine is beautiful, not hardy as a vine or perennial in our region, but you can, at the end of the season, cut it down, winterize it heavily at the ground level, and hope for the best, especially if you're closer to the lake, but more than likely not going to survive, but beautiful, the flowers and the fragrance, and it grows and blooms all summer long. So.
Yeah, it does smell great. And then there's another one that I heard about last season. I think I'm not sure if it was for the first time, but I saw several examples of this lantana, and this is a tree form one, and it's just gorgeous and really striking, and it has kind of a citrusy smell to it.
Yeah, there's cherry berry and a bunch of different lantanas that are beautiful, and again, Blooms all season long, and you can walk up and rub the flowers, and they're very, very citrusy or fruity smelling. Again, a way of experiencing or an opportunity to enjoy another aspect of the garden. So.
Okay.
Great hanging baskets too. They're beautiful.
Yeah, they really are nice in baskets. And then there are, of course, a lot of annuals with a lot of fragrance, like the alyssum we see in the front in this beautiful arrangement. Thank you to Engwalls for bringing those in. Some great examples of some fragrant flowers.
Sweet alyssum is also, it's called alyssum or sweet alyssum because it has a very, very sweet fragrance.
Sweet scent.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, for this week's tour, we take you back to a sprawling landscape northwest of Duluth where the wildlife is pretty comfortable but well tolerated.
Hi, I'm Barb. I'm in Kenosha Township, just a mile east of Pike Lake. Welcome to my garden. This whole backyard was kind of swampy and alderbrush. It was full of alderbrush. There were some old farms way in the back there with huge rock piles, and I just kind of hauled them in here to make walls and borders and stuff. I move my plants more than I move furniture, actually. That's why I've got so many gardens, because things tend to spread and I just can't bear to throw them out. Here we've got some of the Stella Doradale lilies, which I absolutely love. We've got Artemisia, hostas, which the deer have managed to prune for me, and some iris. This is a stone crop sedum, and that really tends to spread, but it's easy enough to pull out. I have some coral bells here that are just starting to bloom. They come in pinks and deep reds, and I've got some white over there by the side of the house. Well, for years it was just really wet and mucky back here, and I kept on planting things hoping it would soak up the water, but they just died. So a friend of mine, a neighbor, had dug a pond in his yard, and I contacted him and asked him if he would do that for me. And I've got fish in there. They winter through. It's 9.5 feet deep, and you can see there's a bunch of pollen on the end of it there. You can hear the fish eating it. You can hear them snapping at it. And then I've got water lilies. My daughter gave me a beautiful pink water lily there. Oh, there is a bud coming up there. You can see it right in the middle. It's absolutely beautiful when it blooms. I put the dry stream bed in to divert the water into the back there. And then when my grandkids were younger, we had secret trails cut all around the place, and they would ride the bicycles. They just had a ball doing that. Got the purple salvia, several peonies, which are later back here because it's more in the shade, so they're basically about a week or two later. It's so full. It's really pretty. And then I've got the yellow loosestrife and a red prince weigela back there. Those are painted daisies. And usually the deer love them. I love the blues and the purples in the gardens, and I always try to get a little bit just about every place. The white rose came from an old farmstead, and it was absolutely gorgeous up there, so I dug up a little slip of it. It was just a tiny plant, and as you can see now it's fairly large. It smells heavenly when it blooms, but it only blooms for like maybe 2 or 3 weeks at a time, and that's it. This is a tea rose. It's the peace rose, and it's one that I gave my mother years ago, and when she moved out of her house, she insisted on digging it up and having me take it home. And I do give it some winter protection, and it has thrived for the last 20 years. So I've got something blooming hopefully all season long.
Thanks very much to Barb in Kenosha Township. And I mentioned the wildlife because she said she's had wolves, coyotes, fox, and she said, well, it keeps the rabbits down.
Oh my!
And maybe the deer as well.
And maybe the deer too. Yeah, so she doesn't really mind all the wildlife around there.
Garden.
There's a solution. No fences, just plenty of
Bring some
kayak.
fox and wolf
Yes.
into the neighborhood.
Yeah, right. Well, we're getting more questions, so let's go to some of them. Kathy from Proctor is wondering about a leaf shredder or how to grind and shred leaves in the spring after raking them out of her garden beds.
That's kind of a good question because there are a lot of mulchers out there, hammer mills of different types that are sold, but in many cases these tend to shred to the point where we get a lot of compaction. I think just running them over with a rotary mower, and that'll cut them enough so that they'll go into the compost pile, still have some structure, And then with a little additional nitrogen, she'll be generating another nice soil amendment in the compost she makes.
Okay.
Beautiful tip, Bob.
Like that?
I like that.
You're going to miss him.
I'm going to miss him.
Renee in Woodland wants to know about her 3 lilac bushes that died this winter, and if anybody else has experienced this. Have you guys heard about much death of lilac bushes?
No, that's
Really?
pretty odd. Yeah,
Huh.
that she would have lost those. They are such a hardy,
They
tough.
really are.
You know, and again, it depends on the variety and where she purchased them. If they're the common, of course, we're very used to the common lilacs, but there are some newer varieties coming in that are a little less hardy. So she wants to make sure if she replaces them, something hardy.
Hardy and then good plant health during the growing season, and then that'll get you through a tough winter, which it was.
Okay. Renee in Woodland, wants to know how to best transplant blueberries from an area that's overcome with crabgrass.
Okay, first you'll want to find a new area that doesn't have any crabgrass to begin with, or maybe she means quack. Did she say crab there? But anyway, doesn't make a difference. Perennial weeds have to be out of the new bed. And then I think we're coming into late June, early July. It's not a good time to lift them. I would be lifting those and removing them into a new bed coming into maybe early fall, the end of August.
Okay. May from Friedenberg wants to know when's the best time to plant rhubarb, and I think it's starting to blossom, or what do you call it?
Well, we got a lot of seed heads that
Yeah,
are forming
we do.
out there right
Thank
now.
you.
So this is definitely not the best time.
No.
We'll say that. The best time is very early in the spring, even before they actually emerge, the buds begin to emerge. But right as they're breaking through the soil, that's just about perfect.
Yeah, and I'm not. It sounded like you said plant rather than transplant. Transplant
She said plant, yes.
I mean, if she's buying a containerized one that she's
okay.
purchasing at a garden center or whatever, she can plant that pretty much when
Right
she
now.
gets home with it.
Oh,
But as
okay.
far as transplanting, absolutely early.
Could still have rhubarb bars and treats this
Maybe
year,
not the
right?
first year, but
Yeah, you should have to do it quickly because remember,
I'm being optimistic.
don't harvest your rhubarb after the 4th of July. So if you can get something done in a couple weeks, you're fine.
yeah, maybe 1 bar.
Okay, Jim from Superior wants to know, is it safe to plant veggies a few days after using a weed killer?
Boy, first we got to know the weed killer. You want to be extremely careful in your garden. Only things that are labeled. If he's talking about Roundup, there isn't going to be a problem planting them there because the product breaks down. The problem is that it hasn't necessarily killed the weeds yet. So as just a rule of thought, get the right product, and generally veggies need to be on the label. And then I would say a couple days is typically too early to be moving
Give it a week
materials
or
in.
so.
Okay, well, we have time for just a couple more. Debbie in Duluth wants to know the name of a rose that almost looks wild. It's a shrub-like, hardy. She sees them all along Highway 61. But maybe you could just give us an example of
Well,
one that would be good.
Grutendorst has been around a long time.
Okay.
Nearly Wild is actually the name of a shrub rose
really?
that is very
Nearly Wild.
wild.
There you go.
There's a lot out there, and it's really finding the Pavement series is beautiful. Tris Bunet is a beautiful, very fragrant shrub rose. So there's really a lot out there. She just has to find one that she likes. So.
And Sandra from Bovee, best time of year to break apart and divide irises?
April 15th to September 15th.
All right.
Even
wait,
August
I'm
15th.
sorry, August 15th.
Yeah, there we go.
That was
there
a
we
long
go.
span.
Yeah. August 15th
Yeah.
to September 15th.
We want to
Thank
get it
you, Bob.
early in the fall. Yes. Yes.
Are they blooming yet at City Hall? Has anybody noticed?
Yeah, they're all over the place. They're starting to bloom.
Okay.
And as we
Great.
found out, they're really hardy if you take them at the right time and move them at the right time in the early fall, just like you
Yeah,
suggested.
and those are beautiful. All right, that's all the time for questions. But here's a look now at some of the flowers grown across the region. It's time for this week's Grow and Show. Marlene Verhoeven of Hayward caught this naughty chipmunk nibbling at her lily. It seems to have a fine sense of balance while dining on the pretty pink plant. Diane Holler of Barnum uses many of her garden-grown flowers for bouquets she generously shares with friends and neighbors. The Sweet William blooms in a colorful mix, while the yellow roses add a graceful pastel to the landscape. And the season wouldn't be complete without praise for the always stunning and ever-reliable rhododendron. This beauty comes courtesy of Greg and Juliana Grell of Hermantown. If you have flowers for sharing or just enjoying, send pictures via email to greatgardening@wdse.org. We love to show what you grow. And it may be our last program for a little while, but keep sending those pictures in. We'll use them in the fall and again next spring. On our calendar, the League of Women Voters of Duluth is having a plant and book sale this Saturday at Mount Royal. And then the Western Garden Tour coming up on August 3rd at Norton Park Methodist Church in Duluth. And this year it's a memorial tour for Linda Johnson Rust, one of the founders of the event. So that's kind of cool. You can find contact information and more about that and other events and information on our website, wdsc.org/gardening. We want to thank everyone who's been volunteering on our phones. A big thank you to tonight's phone volunteers and all the gardeners who've helped over the season. It really has been a great season. Obviously, you guys have been awesome, our perennial experts, Bob Olin and Tom Casper. I can't thank you guys enough for all your expertise.
It's been a lot of fun. It's been a pleasure. We got off to a real interesting start, but I really think this is going to be one of our better and more memorable growing seasons.
Really?
Heard it here first.
So. Okay, all right.
Yeah, great
All the
season.
cold weather and the snow out of the way, now we got nothing but clear sailing.
We look very much forward to that,
Yes.
Bob, and we'll talk about it more in the fall. And we want to thank everyone who called in and emailed. We will be back with a Fall Harvest Special on September 19th, but until then, get out there, get things growing, and enjoy the garden.